Okay, is this working? Can everybody hear me? So how's everybody feeling this morning? Got some caffeine in you? A lot of excitement at the end of a pressing and long week? Yeah? No? Okay. I'll just let that sit out there. No answer necessary. So, first of all, I just want to do three things in my comments here and then turn it over to the people who really run this operation. The first is that I just want to say welcome. It is such an exciting time for me at this moment to be able to welcome you because, as many of you know, hopefully all of you know, this is my first. I actually started in this job 3 weeks ago. And so we're going to be going through this together. And to me, this is such an exciting moment for business school education in general, but it's also such an exciting moment for the George Washington University School of Business. And we're going to be doing some really exciting things over the course of however long they'll let me stay here. But the first steps of those things are going to be us together, me and you. And it's going to be fun. So welcome to the George Washington University School of Business. Welcome to this moment. And I just ask you all to embrace it and be excited about it as I am. Okay? The second thing I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about myself because some of you might be wondering, as I've been asked frequently, how does somebody who has a PhD in sociology and never had an MBA degree fit as a business school dean? So I want to talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about it because it dovetails nicely with what the third point I want to talk about, which is where we are as a school, what we're doing right, where the future lies. And so it'll hopefully give you a sense of our ideals of what we're living by right now and what the vision will take us to, or what vision we're going to be working towards. So I actually come out of a liberal arts background. I was a Chinese literature major at the University of Chicago many, many years ago. And the reason I was a Chinese literature major was because at that time, I knew I wanted to study either economics or some aspect of the social sciences, and I wanted to engage in the dramatic transformation that was emerging in the 80s around the issue of what we call today globalization. But it seemed to me that the heart of what I wanted to do as a college student was to pick some place and learn about it deeply. Not to learn about it in a superficial way, but learn about some place in the world that was going to be important for the global economy in the future. So I spent my time studying language and culture. I figured I'd figure out the social sciences later on. After I lived in Taiwan during that time and tried to master as much as I could. After I graduated from college, I went on to get a PhD in organizational and economic sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. I ended up in sociology precisely because I believe in looking at the world in a complex way. Most of my career has been in dialogue. So when people in the media ask me, why should a sociologist be running a business school? And one of the things I try to point out is that I've been in dialogue with economists my whole life. And there's a lot of great economists out there. Some of my best friends are economists. But one of the things that I differ with economists on is the idea of whether or not we should be narrowing our vision of the world through assumptions. Elegant mathematical models come out of those assumptions, but it's a much more narrow approach to the world. Or should we be embracing and understanding the complexity? Should we actually be understanding that markets are social constructions that are embedded in political systems and social systems and culture and politics and power structures, and the complexity of the human mind and psychology all matter in some fundamental way for getting our hands around how to actually understand how to be the most efficient market economy in the world. Right? And so that, to me, is really at the heart of those two pieces, internationalism and sort of the social and political embeddedness of markets, have really driven my career. So that sort of unexpectedly brought me here. About 6 months ago, I got involved in a conversation about whether or not this would be a good fit. To me, it was a dream fit. I couldn't believe that the opportunity was going to come to me at this moment in my career to actually not just be leading a business school, but be leading a business school in arguably the most powerful city in the global economy. Right? Now, many people, I've come from New York, I've been at NYU Stern for the last 13 years, and many people in New York would argue that point. They would say, actually, New York is the most powerful city in the global economy. I actually think the last 2 years have shed a little bit of a different light on that. But that said, this is the center of a dramatic amount, an incredible concentration of power and influence that intersects with the business world in some fundamental ways. Now, that brings me to this third sort of moment of really thinking about what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're going to do. Okay? This school is in a really interesting place within this moment in the global economy. For about the last 30 to 35 years, business schools have gone the route of what I call the Milton Friedman revolution. So Milton Friedman emerged in the 1950s. Everybody know who Milton Friedman is? You should know that name because he is, in my opinion, the most powerful and the most influential economist of the 20th century. In the 1950s, at the University of Chicago, he was regarded as a great mathematician, but kind of a crackpot. This idea, that was the era of Keynesian economics, and Milton Friedman was this completely neoliberal ideologue who basically argued that the only way that governments have anything to do with markets is as an encumbrance. Regulation is bad, it's inefficient, and it should have nothing to do with markets. And he kind of became a much more popular figure starting in 1970. And by 1980, he and his wife had a television show. They wrote a best-selling book called Free to Choose, and he became Ronald Reagan's economic advisor. And he really led a revolution of thinking about this idea that you have politics over here, and it's bad for markets, and you have markets over here, and what markets know how to do is be efficient, right? And in many ways, that neoclassical revolution really dominated not only American economic thinking for the 80s and 90s, but it also dominated business schools. And in fact, our own business school is in some ways a product of that historically. So the business school and the Elliott School used to be one entity. And at some point they said, you know, you guys take international public policy issues and we'll take the business stuff, we'll teach functional areas of business and we'll teach them well. Wonderful. There's a lot of business schools around the country that teach functional areas of business and teach them well. But in my mind, that approach is a mistake. That approach actually narrows our thinking about how markets are constructed instead of thinking about the ways in which all of these functional areas intersect in fundamental ways with public policy, government, and a fundamental question about what states are in markets. Right? And here we sit in Washington, D.C., with the White House 6 blocks away, the World Bank across the street, the IMF and the IFC right out the window. Right? And we have this opportunity to create something that really embraces this notion of the intersection of business and international institutions and governments that really is about that interstitial relationship. Okay? And so that is really the opportunity that sits before us. Now, there are some things that we're doing really right in that area, but there's more that we're going to do. Now, there's a second piece of this puzzle that kind of happened as a result of the Milton Friedman revolution, but it's also one that I think has just become embedded in American economic thinking because of wonderful magazines like The Economist and many other popular approaches to thinking about this, which is essentially to say that business is business, markets are markets, we are all rational economic actors, homo economicus as they say, and the question of ethics, teaching ethics is not our job. Ethics does not belong in a business school classroom. And in fact, for the last 10 years, since the accounting crisis of 2000, 2001, WorldCom, Enron, and the like, business schools have wrung their hands over, should we be teaching ethics? And many powerful business school faculties have said, nope, ethics is about, that's for philosophy departments to teach. We teach economics, we teach finance, we teach marketing, we teach accounting, but let's leave that to the social scientists and humanists. There's a few schools and one that's leading the pack that say, no, we reject that line of thinking. Actually, ethics is fundamentally about leadership. We have leadership crises in business today because we have taken that line, because we've thought there's a separation between economic action and ethical thinking. Now, this doesn't have a normative view on what ethics are. We're not saying you have to follow a certain route, but you have to be exposed to different types of ethical thinking. The school that leads the pack in that area, the George Washington University School of Business. 2 years ago, under the leadership of Dean Murat Tarimsalar, who's going to talk to you in a few minutes, there was a reform of the curriculum in which they said, we're not going to have that debate. That debate is old school. Ethics is a core of everything that we do. You'll be surprised because to you, as you go through this process, it'll seem obvious and it'll seem clear, and you'll wonder why other business schools are debating, but just know this school takes a leadership position. Under Tim Fort, who you all will be exposed to, you will have the opportunity to be with somebody who's not just a rock star in that field, but is truly a game changer. He is a guy who's changing the world through his thinking about these issues. And so to me, as I've been thinking about that over the course of my career, the opportunity to join a place that had already embraced that kind of thinking and then also had such ripe opportunity to really engage in this conversation about the interstitial relationship between business and politics, it just seemed like a dream come true. And so we have a wonderful curriculum for you that reflects these things. But in addition to that curriculum, we're going to be doing a lot of exciting things over the course of the next couple of years that are really going to be about not just building it out in the curriculum, but building it out in everything we do. I want this school to be at the center of every one of the conversations that are about this relationship between business and public policy and the ways in which business and governments interact and how important ethics is to the classroom. Now, you might be saying, well, I'm in the Master of Accountancy program. What does this have to do with me? I'll tell you a little story. A couple of years ago, one of the best executive education programs I ever did. I used to run the executive education business for Stern, the custom and non-degree business. And once I was talking with the CFO of a little company called AIG, and it was before the crisis, but I think this guy actually knew what was coming. And so it was a very funny conversation on reflection because, you know, he was like, we need some finance training for our CFOs around the world, our controllers, we need finance training, right? He was seeing like all the mess in the books that would become clear later. But at the time I said to him, with all due respect, sir, I don't think you actually need finance. I would suspect that you have very well-trained people technically. And he said, with all due respect, Professor Guthrie, I know my people better than you. And I said, well, hear me out. Because what I think the problem is that you're teaching these people finance, or they have been trained in finance, but they haven't been taught to be leaders of their financial position. They haven't taught to be people who are in a specific financial function within your organization, but think of in a leadership format. Think about how they actually engage with the global economy. Think about issues like ethics. And so he bought it, we got the business, and we designed a program for them that was very much about accounting and finance, but it was about who you are as an accountant in finance. And so the specialized masters at this school actually, I think, do a very nice job of taking out these segments in these functional areas and then knitting them together with what's really strong in the school's existing portfolio. And so that's what we're actually going to be doing for you. So I've taken up too much of your time already, and I need to turn this over to the very capable staff. I would just say one final thing. No business school or no school anywhere works without the people who make things work behind the scene. Okay? So Dean Murat Tarimsalar is my partner in crime in making all of this stuff happening and sort of being the face of the school and the face of the program, but he has an amazing staff that also works for him. So make sure that, that you not only utilize that staff, but you also appreciate them, because these things only work under their hard work. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleagues, and let me just say again, welcome to the George Washington University School of Business.